The River Travel Podcast is about travel stories along America's rivers and the road trips that will take you there. Come with us as we chat with festivals, attractions, eateries, and destinations that call River Valleys home. Come for a visit and find out more at rivertravelmagazine.com.
In this episode, we are chatting with John Anfinson, a member of the Minnesota-Mississippi River Parkway Commission. So, John, exciting news for the River Road receiving the All-American Road nomination. How did that process get its start?
It really happened at the national level. So I'm part of the 10-state Mississippi River Parkway Commission, which oversees the Great River Road. And for the first time since 2009, the Department of Transportation opened the opportunity to submit nominations for All-American Road status. That's the cream of the crop, the top category of scenic byways. So we discussed what that would mean in 2019 to try do that during COVID, as COVID was really starting to, rage around the country. Could we get that done? And 8 of the states decided to go for it. And all 8 states managed to get it done and submitted. And Minnesota was one of those states, and all 8 states got that designation in February.
So can you kind of give us a little rundown of what the National Scenic Byway is? So the National Scenic Byway, we got that around 2000.
There's different dates for the states that came in as National Scenic Byways. And to become a National Scenic Byway, you had to make an argument under one of 6 intrinsic qualities: archaeological, cultural, historic, natural, recreational, scenic, that you were really significant. But to become an All-American road, you had to do it under 2 intrinsic qualities, and you had to do it at the national level. You had to say, why are you significant to the American narrative, to American culture, to the American character in what you are nominating yourself on? And so it's a much heavier lift, and all 8 states did that.
So can you also tell us how the 8 unique scenic reaches fit into the whole picture?
Yeah, so that was Minnesota's choice. Each state could take their own category. All the states had taken historic for the Scenic Byway nomination. But what was that other one we were going to use? We talked about that in Minnesota, and what we realized was that in Minnesota, the river changes more than in any other state. It really transforms about 8 different times. You have Lake Itasca, where the river's born, is one of those sites. Once it leaves Lake Itasca, it's the Serpentine River. A lot of people have the map of the lower Mississippi with all the switchbacks and cutoffs really colored nice. Well, that's what the river looks like from the air coming from Lake Itasca to Brainerd for the most part. But it's a tiny river doing the same thing. So that's Serpentine River. We also have the 6 Headwaters Lakes, one of the first reservoir systems in the country for the Corps of Engineers. And then below Brainerd to St. Anthony Falls, it becomes a prairie river. The river straightens out. There's banks. Some are high, but there's not bluffs. It's a prairie river. At St. Anthony Falls, the only major waterfall on the whole river, the Mississippi River just transforms from that point. For the 8.5 miles below St. Anthony Falls to the mouth of the Minnesota River is the gorge. The river drops 110 feet over 8.5 miles through the tightest canyon anywhere on the river. And then at the Minnesota River confluence, it becomes that big river, the river of Mark Twain, the backwater channels, backwater lakes. It floods down there. And then once you really get below Hastings, you enter the driftless area, the areas that the glaciers really didn't transform. So these are the kind of 8 scenic designations we chose for our nomination.
So, John, you've been part of the Minnesota-Mississippi River Parkway Commission. You're a historian. You've served in different capacities related to the organization, related to culture and heritage. So you kind of have a really in-depth sort of side to it. What makes the Minnesota Great River so special for you?
I have focused on the Mississippi River since my early career with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I spent the first half of my career with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, where I really started learning about the Mississippi in Minnesota, but all the way down to Guttenberg, Iowa, which was part of the St. Paul district. But I also started working on the whole upper Mississippi, the river above St. Louis, and really started learning a lot about it. And then in 2000, I transferred from the Corps of Engineers to the National Park Service at the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, and then eventually became superintendent of that national park unit. the only national park unit whose focus is the Mississippi River. So I went from, everything from the headwaters to Guttenberg, Iowa, to just a 72-mile stretch of the river through the Twin Cities. But I've stayed focused on the whole river in Minnesota and really the upper river. And so it's been such a long part of my career, but it's also my hobby. It's my passion. I love researching and writing and talking about the river.
So, just kind of talking about that hobby, do you like to get outside? Do you like to fish? What are some of your favorite activities when you're on the Great River Road there?
Well, I like traveling along it. I did a trip this year right after I got vaccinated and I knew I could travel safely. I wanted to see, the Great River Road below Minnesota. I wanted to look at, there's 91 interpretive centers associated with the Great River Road. I wanted to check some of those out and what their stories were. So I did a 9-day trip all the way to Vicksburg, Mississippi. And I stopped at any number of sites each day. Just some were open, some weren't, but I just tried to get an understanding of what are the sites we interpret and tell stories of on the Great River Road along the Mississippi. So it was a fantastic trip. And I'm trying to learn to be a better photographer. So I took lots of photographs. I also like, getting on the river and kayaking along the river up here.
So, you kind of serve also as a representative for the Elk River to Hastings region of the Minnesota portion of the road. What are you excited for others to see in the area, maybe that haven't been up in their region?
Well, I started this idea that the different stretches of the river working for the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, which covers that pretty much that same reach, not quite up to Elk River. But you have to realize that in the Twin Cities, we go from the Prairie River. Then at St. Anthony Falls, it becomes the Gorge. And then at the mouth of Minnesota, it becomes the large floodplain river. So I used to ask people this question, how many Mississippis are there in the Twin Cities? Because there's really 3 physically and ecologically, recreationally different Mississippis in the Twin Cities. And you find that at the nexus between those rivers, at St. Anthony Falls, between the Prairie River and the Gorge, has one of the highest concentration of historic, archaeological, scenic sites. These nexuses of change concentrate history and culture. And at the other nexus, at the confluence of the Minnesota and Mississippi River, we have Fort Snelling. It overlooks the Mississippi. Again, into some Dakota tribes, it's the center of the earth. So these changes between rivers really concentrate history and culture. So I think that's what people can come here and experience and learn, is these different rivers and these different stories.
So if people want to find out about, the Minnesota Great River Road, you maybe check out, its origins with Lake Itasca, or check out some of the other things you mentioned, like the Prairie River or the Gorge. What's the best website or social media to send them to?
Well, I'd send them to the Minnesota Mississippi River Parkway Commission's website. It's an exceptional website, and you can actually use an app there called River Trip Planner. If you want to visit the Mississippi, you can put in criteria for what you want to visit, and it will link you to all those sites. There's over 700 sites that they've identified in Minnesota of different kinds that you can visit or experience. So I would go there. And then for the National Great River Road, it also has a great website. If you just search Great River Road, you'll get to that website.
Yeah, just looking at your website, you have some great digital travel guides. You got a list of interpretive centers. It's pretty much a great spot for people to come check out the Minnesota side of the Great River Road.
Yeah.
Experience the Great American Road Trip and take a ride on the nation's scenic byways and backroads that highlight rivers throughout the United States. Explore the people, places, and culture of river towns throughout the U.S. Visit rivertravelmagazine.com. You can subscribe to the River Travel Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We appreciate it.